Welcome to College Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Stanford, UCLA among growing list of colleges facing federal discrimination probe, earliest version of Mickey Mouse set to become public domain in 2024, along with Minnie, Tigger. Morning person? You might have Neanderthal genes to thank. Week T, climate scientists push back against COP28 cheer. HSC is just one small test in a life of learning. Stanford, UCLA among growing list of colleges facing federal discrimination probe. CNN. Stanford University, the University of California, Los Angeles, and Rutgers University have become the latest schools to face investigations by the U.S. Department of Education over allegations of discrimination. The universities are accused of incidents of discrimination against students on the basis of race, color, or national origin. The Department of Education has begun a record number of investigations into college campuses in recent months, following the October 7 terrorist attack on Israel and the subsequent rise in tensions in the U.S. Earliest version of Mickey Mouse set to become public domain in 2024, along with Minnie, Tigger. Bloomberg. Mickey Mouse, one of the most iconic figures in popular culture, will enter the public domain in 2024 as the copyright on his first screen appearance, the 1928 short Steamboat Willie, expires. However, the version of Mickey that will become public is the boat captain in Steamboat Willie who resembles a rat, rather than the more familiar, modern version. Disney retains a separate trademark on Mickey as a corporate mascot and brand identifier, meaning that it will be able to protect the character from unauthorized use. Nonetheless, other major companies, such as Amazon and Google, are beginning to express support for the public domain, and there is now more pushback against copyright extension than there was when the U.S. passed the Mickey Mouse Protection Act in 1998. The current copyright term is unlikely to be extended further as it brought U.S. copyright law into line with the European Union. Morning person? You might have Neanderthal genes to thank. New York Times. Some humans today who are early risers might credit genes they inherited from their Neanderthal ancestors. A study found that Neanderthals carried some of the same clock-related genetic variants as those who report being morning people. The researchers used data from the UK Biobank, a British database holding the genomes of 500,000 volunteers, and found that almost all the ancient body clock variants increased the odds that the volunteers were morning people. The researchers are now looking at other databases of volunteers with other ancestries to verify their findings. Week T, climate scientists push back against COP28 cheer. South China Morning Post. The recent UN climate deal that approved a call to transition away from fossil fuels has been criticized by many climate scientists for its lack of ambition. While world leaders have hailed the deal as a major milestone, scientists argue that the agreement lacks firm boundaries and does not go far enough to phase out fossil fuels. They argue that the agreement is a pivotal landmark, but does not do enough to limit global warming to below catastrophic levels. The failure to achieve meaningful progress is a source of great concern as the window of opportunity to limit warming is closing. HSC is just one small test in a life of learning. The Sydney Morning Herald. The changing education landscape in Australia is making it more difficult for parents to choose the best school for their children, as old certainties are being disrupted by reforms. Education in Australia is currently facing numerous challenges, including declining academic performance, a widening gap in reading abilities, and reports of ill-prepared teachers and disruptive behaviors in the classroom. The Albanese government has promised to work with state and territory governments to address these issues and improve education for all students, with a particular focus on those from low socioeconomic backgrounds and regional areas. How one sleeps found linked to dementia risk. The Independent. People with irregular sleep patterns may have a higher risk of developing dementia, according to a study published in journal Neurology. The research indicated the regularity of a person's sleep, i.e. going to bed and waking up at the same time each day, played a role in their risk of developing dementia. The study followed 88,000 people with an average age of 62 for 7 years. Participants who experienced the most irregular sleep were most likely to develop dementia. Sleep patterns have previously been linked to metabolic conditions and heart health. CCTV shared of missing Mother Gaynor Lord's last sighting, latest. The Independent. CCTV footage has been released showing the last known movements of missing Mother Gaynor Lord, who disappeared after leaving work in Norwich City Centre on Friday. The 55-year-old's belongings, including clothing, 2 rings, a mobile phone, and glasses, were found scattered in Wensum Park, around 1.5 miles from her workplace. Her coat was discovered in the River Wensum, which runs through the park. Police believe it is likely that she may have entered the water and underwater search teams have been searching the river. Norfolk police have described her disappearance as out of character and are treating it as a missing person case. They are also speaking to officers involved in the search for Nicola Bulley, who went missing in January while walking her dog. Pennsylvania lawmakers defeat funding for Penn amid criticism over school's stance on anti-Semitism. Associated Press. The Pennsylvania House of Representatives has rejected legislation to send over $33 million to the University of Pennsylvania's veterinary school. The funding was rejected after the university's president resigned amid allegations of tolerating anti-Semitism. The legislation failed to reach the two-thirds majority required by the state constitution. House Republicans opposed the funding, arguing that the university must do more to demonstrate its opposition to anti-Semitism. The university's president, Liz McGill, resigned after criticism over her testimony at a congressional hearing, in which she was unable to say that calls for the genocide of Jews on campus would violate the school's conduct policy. Africans are reshaping French one rap and joke at a time. The Sydney Morning Herald. The French language is evolving, influenced by the slang and expressions of African youth. Africa is home to more than 60% of daily French speakers, and 80% of French students are in Africa. The influence of African youth is being spread through social media platforms such as TikTok and YouTube. African rappers and artists are creating new words and expressions that are gaining popularity and reshaping the language. The evolving language is changing the visions and ideologies that French carries, which has caused some debate and angst among intellectuals in France. The youth population in Africa is increasing, while the rest of the world is aging. By 2060, it has been predicted that up to 85% of French speakers will live on the African continent, compared to 90% living in Europe and other Western countries in the 1960s. Some African countries have evicted French ambassadors and troops, and others are targeting the French language itself. However, French President Emmanuel Macron has said that France should take pride in being essentially one country among others that learns, speaks, and writes in French. How North Sydney boys pulled off the greatest heist in HSC history. The Sydney Morning Herald. North Sydney Boys High School has beaten James Roos Agricultural High School for the first time in 27 years to become the top-ranked school in New South Wales, Australia. The school increased its proportion of Band 6s, students achieving over 90%, in English every year, and teachers worked to foster a love of literature and encourage students to see themselves as English students. The students were inspired by their school captain's promise to beat James Roos in his first address and celebrated their achievement with applause and excitement. Scientists may know why many mothers and children have birthdays in same month. The Independent. An analysis of more than 10 million births in Spain and France has found that it is more common than previously thought for family members to have birthdays in the same month or season. The study also found that there was an excess of children with mothers born in the same month. The researchers believe that the tendency for family members to share the same birth season may be due to both social and biological factors. However, further research is needed to confirm the results and understand the implications. The city which still celebrates Saturnalia. BBC. The ancient Roman festival of Saturnalia is celebrated every year in Chester, England, as part of the city's Winter Watch Parade. The festival, which honors Saturn, the Roman god of farming and harvest, was originally a one-day event but eventually lasted for a week. During Saturnalia, the usual societal rules of Rome were set aside and people could relax and have fun. The festival featured gift-giving, excessive eating and drinking, and the lighting of candles. The modern-day celebration in Chester combines the Roman festival with the city's medieval parades and processions. Dozens injured in Kiev missile strike as 90% of Putin's troops lost. The Independent. Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine, suffered a drone attack by Russia, leaving at least 51 people injured. The attack occurred in the early hours of Wednesday, with loud explosions and missiles being intercepted by Ukraine's air defense systems. The missiles targeted the capital, but all were successfully downed. However, debris from the intercepted missiles fell in the city's eastern district, damaging buildings including a children's hospital and the water supply system. This attack comes as Russian forces have reportedly suffered devastating losses, with 87% of their pre-war troops being lost. The Institute for the Study of War cited a declassified U.S. intelligence document stating that Russia has lost 315,000 military personnel out of the 360,000 in their inventory before February 2022. Despite these losses, intelligence suggests that there are currently 420,000 Russian personnel in occupied Ukraine, although they are likely to have lower combat capabilities than their predecessors. China condemns Canada's support for Philippines on South China Sea incidents. The Globe and Mail. China has condemned Canada's support for the Philippines in their recent confrontations in the South China Sea. The Chinese embassy in Canada accused Canada of pursuing its own geopolitical interests and jeopardizing regional peace and stability. The Philippines has accused China of violating its sovereignty by firing water cannons at its resupply boats and ramming a vessel near disputed waters. The United States has also voiced opposition to China's actions and supported the Philippines. China claims the entire South China Sea as its own. Southern Indiana lawmakers discuss legislative priorities. Yahoo! Southern Indiana lawmakers are considering their priorities as they head into a short legislative session. The session will begin January 8 and end by mid-March. The News and Tribune spoke with local lawmakers about legislation they plan to introduce in 2024. Most lawmakers are limited to filing 5 bills due to the short session. Hello, everyone. It's your favorite observer from the 6-degree world, Dr. Six. I hope you're all doing well and ready to dive into some interesting news stories from around the globe. We have quite the mix today, with topics ranging from discrimination probes at universities to the evolving French language. So, let's get started. First up, we have the news that Stanford University, UCLA, and Rutgers University are facing investigations by the U.S. Department of Education over allegations of discrimination. Now, I don't know about you, but I always thought universities were places of inclusivity and learning. It's a shame to see these prestigious institutions caught up in such controversies. Let's hope they can address these issues and create a more inclusive environment for all students. In other news, Mickey Mouse is set to enter the public domain in 2024. Yes, you heard that right. The iconic mouse is finally going to be free for all to use, well, sort of. You see, it's the early version of Mickey, the boat captain in Steamboat Willie, who will be entering the public domain. So, if you're planning on creating your own cartoon mouse empire, make sure to stick with the original look. Disney still holds the rights to the more modern version. But hey, it's a step in the right direction for copyright laws, right? Moving on, did you know that being a morning person might be in your genes? According to a study, some humans today who are early risers might have inherited their clock-related genetic variants from their Neanderthal ancestors. So, next time you're up at the crack of dawn and feeling wide awake, you can thank your Neanderthal genes for that burst of energy. Just try not to wake up the rest of us night owls, okay? Now, let's talk about the recent UN climate deal. World leaders are hailing it as a major milestone, but climate scientists are pushing back, calling it weak tea. They argue that the agreement lacks ambition and doesn't go far enough to phase out fossil fuels. As someone who enjoys a good cup of tea, I have to say, I prefer mine a little stronger. If we want to tackle climate change, we need more than just a weak brew. We need bold and decisive action. Speaking of education, the changing landscape in Australia is making it more difficult for parents to choose the best school for their children. With declining academic performance and reports of ill-prepared teachers and disruptive behaviors in the classroom, it's clear that reforms are needed. The Albanese government has promised to address these issues and improve education for all students. Let's hope they can find a solution that benefits everyone, especially those from low socioeconomic backgrounds and regional areas. Now, let's delve into some interesting research. Did you know that irregular sleep patterns may be linked to a higher risk of developing dementia? A study found that the regularity of a person's sleep, going to bed and waking up at the same time each day, played a role in their risk of developing the disease. So, if you want to keep your brain sharp, it might be time to establish a consistent sleep routine. And no, binge watching your favorite show until the early hours of the morning doesn't count as a routine. In other news, a mother has gone missing in Norwich, and the police are treating it as a missing person case. It's always heartbreaking to hear about these kinds of stories, and I hope that she is found safe and sound. If you have any information, please reach out to the authorities. Sometimes, it's the smallest detail that can make all the difference. Now, let's talk about another missing piece of the puzzle. The Pennsylvania House of Representatives has rejected funding for the University of Pennsylvania's veterinary school. The funding was rejected after allegations of tolerating anti-Semitism at the university. House Republicans argued that the university must do more to demonstrate its opposition to anti-Semitism. It's a reminder that the fight against discrimination and hatred is ongoing, and we must hold institutions accountable for their actions. Let's switch gears and talk about the evolving French language. African youth are reshaping the language with their slang and expressions, spreading their influence through social media platforms. This is causing some debate and angst among intellectuals in France, but personally, I think it's amazing to see languages evolve and adapt. Language is a living thing, and it should reflect the people who speak it. So, let's embrace the changes and celebrate the diversity of our global linguistic landscape. Next up, we have some HSC drama in New South Wales, Australia. North Sydney Boys High School has beaten James Roos Agricultural High School for the first time in 27 years to become the top-ranked school. Congratulations to the students and teachers at North Sydney Boys. It just goes to show that hard work and dedication can lead to great achievements. And remember, it's not just about the grades, it's about the love of learning. In some fascinating research news, scientists may have discovered why many mothers and children have birthdays in the same month. An analysis of millions of births found that it is more common than previously thought for family members to share the same birth season. The researchers believe that social and biological factors play a role in this phenomenon. So, next time you're celebrating a family birthday, you can blame it on genetics and maybe even plan a joint celebration. And finally, let's end on a festive note. The ancient Roman festival of Saturnalia is still celebrated every year in Chester, England. During Saturnalia, the usual societal rules were set aside, and people could relax and have fun. It's a reminder that sometimes, we all need a break from the stresses of life and just enjoy ourselves. So, grab a candle, indulge in some excessive eating and drinking, and let loose like the Romans did. That wraps up our news roundup for today. I hope you enjoyed our journey through the latest headlines. Now, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on these stories? Do you have any questions or opinions you'd like to share? Let's keep the conversation going, because remember, in the 6-degree world, everyone's voice matters. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.